In the beginning, there were two kingdoms, two ancient civilizations rising along the same sacred river, their destinies intertwined like the twin currents of the Nile itself. To the north, Egypt, golden, powerful, immortalized in stone and legend. To the south, Nubia, mysterious, resilient, written out of history by those who feared its truth. For over 2,000 years, these empires clashed and cooperated, conquered and coexisted, in a rivalry so profound it would shape the entire African continent. This is not the story you were taught in school. This is the hidden war that built civilizations, toppled pharaohs, and crowned black kings over the land of the pyramids. This is Egypt versus Nubia, the greatest rivalry ancient Africa ever knew. Before we journey deeper into this untold epic, join us on this channel where we uncover the real history they erased from the books. Subscribe now, because the stories we tell here will change everything you thought you knew about Africa's past. The year was 3100 BCE. While much of the world still wanders in scattered tribes, the Nile Valley blazes with the light of civilization. But this is not one civilization, it is two. In the north, along the fertile delta where the Nile meets the Mediterranean, the kingdoms of Upper and Lower Egypt unite under the legendary King Nama, forging what will become one of history's most iconic empires. Temples rise, hieroglyphs are carved, the age of the pharaohs begins. But Egypt did not emerge in isolation. To the south, beyond the first cataract of the Nile, another kingdom stirs. The land of Kush, known to the Egyptians as Nubia, the land of gold. Here, along the banks of the same river, a people equally ancient, equally sophisticated, build their own centers of power. The Nubians are darker-skinned, fierce, and wealthy beyond measure. Their mines overflow with gold, their archers are unmatched, and their culture pulses with a vitality that will endure for millennia. From the very beginning, Egypt and Nubia are connected. They trade, they intermarry, they share gods and customs. But they also compete. Egypt looks south and sees wealth, gold, ivory, ebony, incense. Nubia looks north and sees ambition, a neighbor growing too powerful, too hungry. The stage is set for a confrontation that will last 2,000 years. The Egyptians call the Nubians vile in their inscriptions, yet they covet Nubian gold to fill their treasuries and Nubian soldiers to fight their wars. The Nubians, for their part, watch Egypt's rise with cautious eyes, knowing that their southern kingdoms stand in the path of an empire that never stops expanding. By 2500 BCE, during Egypt's Old Kingdom, the age of the Great Pyramids, Egyptian expeditions pushed deeper into Nubian territory. They are not mere trading missions. They are raids, military campaigns designed to extract resources and assert dominance. Egyptian kings boast of bringing back thousands of Nubian captives, cattle, and riches. Pharaoh Sneferu claims to have captured 7,000 Nubian prisoners and 200,000 head of livestock in a single campaign. Whether these numbers are exaggerated or not, the message is clear. Egypt views Nubia as a source of plunder, a land to be controlled. But Nubia does not submit easily. The Nubians are formidable warriors. Their bowmen, known as the Tarseti, the land of the bow, are so skilled that even Egyptian texts acknowledge their superiority in archery. Nubian resistance is fierce, and the southern frontier becomes a constant battleground. Then comes the Middle Kingdom, around 2000 BCE, and Egypt's strategy shifts. Instead of mere raiding, the pharaohs build a network of massive fortresses along the Nubian frontier. These are not simple outposts, they are colossal military installations, with walls 20 feet thick, bastions, moats, and garrisons of hundreds of soldiers. Fortresses like Buhen, Semna, and Urunati dominate the landscape, designed to control trade routes and intimidate the Nubian kingdoms. The message is unmistakable. Egypt intends to occupy Nubia to make it a permanent province of the empire. For centuries, these fortresses stand as symbols of Egyptian dominance, and Nubia is forced into a subordinate role, its wealth siphoned north to feed the pharaoh's ambitions. But history has a way of humbling empires. Around 1650 BCE, Egypt fractures. The Middle Kingdom collapses into chaos as foreign invaders, the Hyksos, sweep in from the northeast and seize control of northern Egypt. The pharaohs flee south, their power shattered. Egypt, for the first time in its history, is divided and weak. And in that moment of Egyptian vulnerability, Nubia sees its chance. The kingdom of Kush, centered around the city of Kerma, rises to unprecedented power. No longer content to be Egypt's subordinate, Kerma becomes a rival empire in its own right. The Kushites reclaim their lands, push north, and even ally with the Hyksos against the weakened Egyptian rulers. For a brief, glorious period, Nubia is ascendant, and Egypt is on the defensive. The tables have turned. The fortresses that once symbolized Egyptian dominance are now abandoned or occupied by Nubian forces. Kerma's kings build enormous funerary structures, fill their tombs with treasures, and sacrifice hundreds of retainers to accompany them into the afterlife, a display of power and wealth that rivals anything in Egypt. Nubian culture flourishes. Distinctive pottery, monumental architecture, and a fierce independence define this golden age of Kushite civilization. For over a century, while Egypt struggles to reunite, Nubia enjoys a period of autonomy and strength it has not known in generations. But Egypt does not stay broken forever. Around 1550 BCE, a new dynasty rose in Thebes, the 18th dynasty, marking the beginning of the new kingdom. These pharaohs are warriors, determined to restore Egypt's glory and expel the foreign Hyksos from their land. And once they succeed, they turn their gaze southward with a vengeance. Nubia, which had grown strong during Egypt's weakness, now faces the full might of a resurgent empire. Pharaoh Ahmose I begins the reconquest. His successors, Amenhotep I, Thutmose I, push deeper into Nubian territory with relentless military campaigns. The Egyptian army, now equipped with chariots and composite bows learned from the Hyksos, is more formidable than ever. Thutmose I is particularly brutal. He sails his war fleet up the Nile past the Third Cataract, crushing Nubian resistance along the way. In a chilling display of power, he hangs the body of a defeated Nubian chief upside down from the prow of his ship as he returns to Thebes. The message is clear. Defiance will be met with annihilation. Egypt does not merely want to control Nubia, it wants to break its spirit. Over the next century, the Egyptians established a colonial administration in Nubia, appointing a viceroy of Kush to govern the region and ensure the steady flow of gold and resources northward. Temples are built to Egyptian gods, and Nubian elites are educated in Egyptian culture, language, and religion. It is a calculated policy of assimilation and control. Yet even under occupation, Nubia does not forget itself. The culture endures, the people remember, and deep in the southern reaches, beyond Egypt's immediate grasp, new centers of power begin to coalesce. For 4 centuries, Nubia has existed under Egyptian dominance. The new kingdom pharaohs Thutmose III, Amenhotep III, Ramses II rule the southern lands as a colonial possession, extracting wealth and labor while imposing Egyptian culture on Nubian elites. Temples dedicated to Egyptian gods rise in Nubian cities. Nubian princes are taken to Egypt to be raised in the pharaoh's court, learning the language, the religion, the customs of their overlords. It is a strategy of cultural conquest, designed to make Nubia an extension of Egypt itself. And for a time, it works. The Nubians, at least on the surface, adopt Egyptian ways. They worship Amun-Ra, build in Egyptian architectural styles, and serve in the pharaoh's armies. But beneath this veneer of assimilation, something else is happening. The Nubians are learning. They are absorbing Egyptian military tactics, administrative systems, and religious practices not to become Egyptians, but to become stronger Kushites. By 1100 BCE, the new kingdom began its slow decline. Internal strife, economic troubles, invasions by the Sea Peoples, and the rising power of Libyan chieftains erode Egypt's strength. The pharaohs lose their grip on distant territories, and Nubia slips from their control. The viceroy of Kush disappears from the records, the colonial apparatus crumbles, and in the power vacuum, a new Kushite kingdom emerges, centered on the city of Napata, near the fourth cataract of the Nile. This is not a sudden rebellion, it is a gradual, deliberate resurgence. The Kushite kings of Napata rebuild their power in the shadows of Egypt's decline, carefully consolidating control over their homeland while Egypt tears itself apart. By 750 BCE, Egypt was in chaos. The country is divided between rival dynasties, Libyan kings in the Delta, petty rulers in Middle Egypt, and weak pharaohs in Thebes. The glory of the new kingdom is a distant memory. The land of the pyramids, once the greatest empire on earth, is fractured and vulnerable. And watching from the south, the Kushite king Kushite sees an opportunity. Kushite is no ordinary ruler. He commands a disciplined army, controls vast wealth, and most importantly, he understands Egyptian culture better than the Egyptians themselves. For centuries, Nubia has been shaped by Egypt. Now it is time for Nubia to reshape Egypt. Kushite begins his move carefully, not with conquest, but with diplomacy and religion. He marches north to Thebes, the ancient religious heart of Egypt, and positions himself as the champion of the god Amun-Ra. The priests of Thebes, disillusioned with the weak and divided northern kings, welcome him. The highest religious position in Thebes, effectively giving him control over the city's spiritual and political life. It is a masterstroke. Without a full-scale invasion, Kushite has secured a foothold in Egypt and the legitimacy that comes with it. When he dies, his son Piye inherits not just a kingdom, but a mission to reunite Egypt under Kushite rule. Piye is one of history's great forgotten conquerors. Around 727 BCE, he launches a full-scale invasion of Egypt. But Piye does not see himself as a foreign invader. He sees himself as Egypt's rightful savior, the true pharaoh who came to restore order and piety to a land corrupted by petty kings and false rulers. His army sweeps northward, disciplined and unstoppable. City after city submits. When he reaches Memphis, the ancient capital, he lays siege. The city falls. Piye enters Egypt's holiest temples, performs the rituals of kingship, and declares himself pharaoh. For the first time in history, a Kushite, a black African king from Nubia, sits on the throne of Egypt. But Piye is not interested in permanent occupation. After demonstrating his dominance, receiving the submission of the northern kings, and restoring order, he does something extraordinary. He goes home. He sails back up the Nile to Napata, leaving Egypt in the hands of local rulers who now acknowledge his supremacy. It is a decision that baffles historians. Why conquer Egypt, only to leave? Perhaps Piye believes his point is made, that his divine mission is fulfilled. Or perhaps he understands that ruling Egypt from Napata is impractical, and symbolic dominance is enough. Whatever his reasoning, Piye's campaign establishes Kushite authority over Egypt, and his successors will finish what he started. Shabaka, Piye's brother, succeeds him and takes a different approach. Around 715 BCE, Shabaka invades Egypt again, but this time he stays. He deposes the last rival king, firmly establishes Kushite control, and moves the royal court to Memphis. He becomes not just a Kushite king ruling over Egypt, but an Egyptian pharaoh in the fullest sense, building temples, commissioning inscriptions, and presenting himself as the restorer of ancient traditions. The 25th dynasty, the Kushite dynasty, is now the ruling power of Egypt. Black pharaohs from Nubia command the armies, fill the treasuries, and govern the most famous civilization in the ancient world. It is a stunning reversal of history and a moment of unparalleled African power. For the next 60 years, the Kushite pharaohs ruled Egypt. Shabaka, Shabitku, Taharka, These kings preside over a renaissance of art, architecture, and culture. They build and restore temples on a grand scale, revive old religious traditions, and patronize the arts. Taharqa, in particular, becomes one of Egypt's most celebrated builders, erecting monuments from the Delta to Nubia. He is mentioned in the Bible, appears in Assyrian records, and commands respect across the ancient Near East. Under Kushite rule, Egypt experiences a cultural revival, a return to the glories of the Old and Middle Kingdoms. The Kushites, ironically, proved to be more devoted to Egyptian traditions than many native Egyptian rulers. But their reign is not without challenges. To the northeast, a new superpower is rising, Assyria, the most ruthless military machine the ancient world has ever seen. The Assyrian kings, expansionist and brutal, have their eyes on Egypt. They see the Kushite pharaohs as obstacles to their dominance of the region. Around 674 BCE, the Assyrians invaded Egypt. Taharqa leads the defense, and initially he holds them off. But the Assyrians are relentless. They return again and again with overwhelming force. In 671 BCE, the Assyrian king Esarhaddon smashed through Egyptian defenses and captured Memphis. Taharqa flees south. It is a humiliating defeat, but he does not give up. Taharqa regroups and counterattacks, briefly retaking Memphis. But the Assyrians come back with even greater fury. In 666 BCE, Ashurbanipal, the new Assyrian king, launched a devastating campaign. He sacks Thebes, the city that had been Egypt's spiritual heart for over 1,000 years. The destruction is total. Temples are looted, monuments are smashed, and the wealth of Thebes is carried off to Assyria. It is one of the greatest cultural catastrophes of the ancient world, and it marks the end of Kushite rule over Egypt. Taharqa's successor, Tutankhamun, makes one last attempt to hold Egypt, but the Assyrians crush him. The Kushite pharaohs retreat south, back across the border, back to Nubia. Egypt is lost. The 25th dynasty is over. But the story of Kush is far from finished. Defeated in Egypt, the Kushites return to their homeland not as broken refugees, but as a civilization transformed. They have ruled the greatest empire in the world. They have absorbed its knowledge, its wealth, its grandeur. And now, in the heart of Africa, they will build something new. The capital moves from Napata to Meroe, further south, beyond the reach of Egypt's influence. Here, the Kushites forge a new identity. They retain elements of Egyptian culture, the gods, the pyramids, the hieroglyphs, but they also reclaim their African roots. Meroe becomes the new beating heart of Kushite civilization, a city that will stand for nearly 1,000 years. It rises in a region rich in resources, iron, gold, timber, and positioned strategically between the trade routes of Africa and the Mediterranean world. But Meroe is not a mere copy of Egypt. It is distinctly Kushite, a synthesis of African and Egyptian traditions that evolves into something entirely its own. The pyramids at Meroe, for instance, are steeper and smaller than their Egyptian counterparts, built not for foreign rulers, but for native Kushite kings and queens. The temples honor both Egyptian gods and African deities. The language shifts. Hieroglyphs give way to Meroitic script, a unique writing system that scholars still struggle to fully decipher. Kush, having learned from Egypt, now surpasses it in independence and innovation. The move to Meroe also represents a strategic retreat from the Egyptian sphere of influence. After the Assyrian expulsion, Egypt itself became a pawn in the game of empires, first Assyrian, then Persian, then Greek under Alexander the Great, and finally Roman. Egypt, the ancient superpower, loses its independence entirely. Meanwhile, Kush endures. The Kushites wisely avoided direct confrontation with the new Mediterranean powers, focusing instead on consolidating their position in Africa. They controlled trade routes that stretched deep into the continent, exchanging gold, ivory, ebony, and slaves for Mediterranean goods. Meroe becomes a cosmopolitan center where African, Egyptian, and Hellenistic influences blend into a rich cultural tapestry. And crucially, Meroe masters iron. While Egypt, with its reliance on bronze and stone, remains technologically conservative, the Kushites embrace ironworking on an industrial scale. Meroe's furnaces glow day and night, producing iron tools, weapons, and agricultural implements that give the kingdom a technological edge over its neighbors. This iron wealth fuels military strength, economic prosperity, and agricultural expansion. Kush becomes an African superpower in its own right, no longer defined by its relationship to Egypt, but by its own achievements. Yet Egypt, even under foreign rule, remains a shadow over Kush. The rivalry never truly ends, it merely changes form. When the Persians conquered Egypt in 525 BCE, they attempted to push south into Nubia. Cambyses II, the Persian king, reportedly launches an expedition against Kush, but it ends in disaster. According to the Greek historian Herodotus, the Persian army gets lost in the desert, runs out of supplies, and is forced to retreat after resorting to cannibalism. Whether this account is exaggerated or not, it is clear that Kush successfully resists Persian encroachment. The southern kingdom remains unconquered, a thorn in the side of every empire that tries to dominate the Nile. Centuries pass. Alexander the Great conquers Egypt in 332 BCE and establishes the Ptolemaic dynasty, Greek rulers who adopt the trappings of pharaonic power. The Ptolemies view Nubia with the same mixture of desire and disdain that ancient Egyptian pharaohs did. They seek Nubian gold and control of the southern trade routes, but they also recognize Kush as a formidable rival. Diplomatic relations are established, treaties are signed, and for a time, an uneasy peace exists. The Ptolemies even adopt some Kushite practices, and Kushite ambassadors are received with honor in Alexandria. But beneath the diplomacy, the old rivalry simmers. Then comes Rome. In 30 BCE, after the death of Cleopatra, Egypt became a province of the Roman Empire. Rome is unlike any power the Nile Valley has seen before, vast, organized, and utterly ruthless in its pursuit of resources. The Romans immediately turned their attention southward, seeking to control Nubia's gold and secure Egypt's southern border. They established a garrison at Aswan, at the first cataract of the Nile, the traditional boundary between Egypt and Nubia, and in 25 BCE, tensions exploded into open war. The Roman prefect of Egypt, alias Gallus, is distracted by a disastrous campaign in Arabia. Seeing an opportunity, the Kushites attack. But this is not an ordinary Kushite military campaign. This is a war led by a woman, a Kandake, a queen. Her name is Amanirenas, and she is about to become one of the most formidable opponents Rome ever faces. Kandake is not just a royal title, it represents a unique feature of Kushite society. In Kush, women can rule in their own right, commanding armies and governing the kingdom with the same authority as any king. This is almost unheard of in the ancient Mediterranean world, where women are rarely more than pawns in male power struggles. But in Kush, female power is institutionalized, and the Kandakis are legendary for their strength and ferocity. Amanirenas is middle-aged, battle-hardened, and missing one eye lost in a previous conflict. She commands an army of thousands and strikes at the Roman garrison of Aswan with overwhelming force. The Romans, unprepared for such aggression, are caught off guard. The Kushite forces storm the city, destroy statues of the Roman Emperor Augustus, and capture Roman prisoners. As a symbolic act of defiance, Amanirenas has a bronze head of Augustus torn from a statue, taken back to Meroe, and buried beneath the steps of a temple, so that every person entering the temple would walk over the face of Rome's emperor. It is a calculated insult, a declaration that Kush does not fear Rome. Rome, of course, cannot let this stand. The honor of the empire is at stake. The prefect Gaius Petronius is dispatched to deal with the Kushite threat. He marches south with a disciplined Roman legion, recaptures Aswan, and pushes deep into Nubian territory. The Romans are experienced, well-equipped, and brutal in their efficiency. They besiege the Kushite fortress of Qasr Ibrim, a strategic stronghold overlooking the Nile. The battle is fierce, but Roman siege tactics prevail. Qasr Ibrim falls, and Petronius continues his advance toward Napata, the old Kushite capital. But Amanirenas did not surrender. She retreats, regroups, and continues to harass Roman forces. The war drags on, costly and inconclusive. Rome, master of the Mediterranean, finds itself bogged down in a grinding conflict against an African kingdom that refuses to submit. The terrain is harsh, the supply lines are stretched, and the Kushites use guerrilla tactics to bleed the Roman legions. Petronius, despite his military victories, realizes that conquering Kush is impractical. The cost in men and resources is too high for a region that offers limited strategic value to Rome. So, in an extraordinary twist, Rome negotiates. Amanirenas sent envoys to the Roman Emperor Augustus himself, and a peace treaty was signed around 20 BCE. The terms are remarkably favorable to Kush. Rome withdraws its forces from Kushite territory, abandons its demands for tribute, and agrees to a fixed border at the First Cataract. Kush retains its independence, and Rome, mighty Rome, which crushes Gauls and enslaves Germans, backs down. It is one of the few times in history that Rome negotiates a peace treaty from a position of relative weakness. And the woman responsible is a one-eyed African queen who dared to defy the greatest empire the world has ever known. The story of Amanirenas and her war against Rome becomes legendary. The treaty between Kush and Rome marks a turning point, not just in the rivalry between Egypt and Nubia, but in the broader history of Africa's relationship with Mediterranean empires. For over 2,000 years, since the first Egyptian raids into Nubian territory, the Nile Valley has been a battleground of power, ambition, and survival. And now, for the first time, an African kingdom has forced Rome, the most powerful empire in the world, to recognize its sovereignty. Amanirenas' victory is not just military, it is symbolic. It proves that African kingdoms, when united and determined, can stand against any force, no matter how mighty. But the peace treaty does not mean the end of interaction between Kush and Roman Egypt. On the contrary, trade flourishes. Meroe becomes a critical hub in the trade networks linking sub-Saharan Africa with the Mediterranean world. Goods flow north: gold, ivory, ebony, ostrich feathers, exotic animals and south wine, olive oil, glassware, and luxury goods from across the Roman Empire. The border at Aswan becomes not a wall, but a gateway. Roman merchants travel to Meroe, and Kushite envoys appear in Alexandria and even Rome itself. The rivalry has transformed into a relationship of mutual benefit, though always tinged with the memory of conflict. Yet beneath this commercial exchange, the cultural rivalry persists. Egypt, now thoroughly Hellenized and Romanized, has lost much of its ancient identity. The old gods are syncretized with Greek deities. The pharaohs are replaced by foreign emperors. The hieroglyphs are slowly forgotten, replaced by Greek and Latin. Egypt, in a sense, has been colonized not just politically but culturally. Its soul has been reshaped by outsiders. Kush, on the other hand, remains definitely African. The Kushites continue to worship their gods, write in their own script, and govern according to their own traditions. The pyramids at Meroe continue to rise, each one a testament to the endurance of Kushite civilization. In this way, Kush preserves something that Egypt has lost: a sense of unbroken continuity with its ancient past. The religion of Kush is particularly fascinating. While the Kushites adopted many Egyptian gods during their period of domination, they never abandoned their indigenous beliefs. Apedimak, the lion-headed war god unique to Kush, is worshipped alongside Amun-Ra. Temples are built to honor both African and Egyptian deities, and the religious syncretism that results is distinctly Kushite. The priests of Meroe wield enormous power, sometimes even selecting or deposing kings through religious authority. This theocratic element gives Kushite society a stability and continuity that helps it endure through centuries of external pressure. The role of women in Kushite society also sets it apart from both Egypt and the Mediterranean world. The institution of the Kandake, the queen mother or ruling queen, is a striking feature of Meroitic culture. Multiple Kandakes ruled Kush over the centuries, some as regents for young kings, others as independent monarchs. They lead armies, commission monuments, and govern with absolute authority. This is in stark contrast to Egypt, where female rulers like Hatshepsut and Cleopatra are anomalies, forced to justify their power in a male-dominated system. In Kush, female leadership is institutionalized and respected. The Kandaks are depicted in art as strong, formidable figures, often shown in full military regalia, wielding weapons, trampling enemies. They are not passive consorts. They are warriors and rulers in their own right. For centuries, Meroe thrives. Its iron industry booms, its trade networks expand. Its pyramids multiply eventually. There are more pyramids in Nubia than in Egypt, over 200 of them dotting the landscape around Meroe and other royal cities. But no civilization lasts forever. By the 2nd and 3rd centuries CE, Meroe began to show signs of decline. The reasons are complex and debated by scholars. Environmental degradation, deforestation caused by intensive iron production may have weakened the agricultural base. Climate change could have reduced rainfall and made the region less hospitable. But more significantly, the trade routes that made Meroe wealthy begin to shift. New powers are rising in the region. To the east, the kingdom of Aksum, centered in what is now Ethiopia, grows in strength. Aksum controls the Red Sea trade routes and begins to siphon off commerce that once flowed through Meroe. To the north, Rome's grip on Egypt weakens as the empire itself enters a period of crisis and transformation. The stable Mediterranean market that Kushite goods once flowed into becomes fragmented and unstable. And perhaps most importantly, nomadic tribes, particularly the Noba and Blemies, begin raiding Kushite territory from the deserts, disrupting agriculture and trade. Meroe, once a fortress of prosperity, finds itself increasingly isolated and besieged. Around 350 CE, the final blow came. King Ezana of Aksum launches a military campaign against Kush, claiming that the Kushites have been raiding Aksumite territory. Aksumite inscriptions boast of a great victory, the sacking of cities, and the subjugation of Kush. Whether this campaign is the cause or merely the final nail in the coffin of an already collapsing kingdom is unclear. But by the mid-4th century, Meroe was abandoned. The royal court disappears from history. The great city falls silent, its furnaces cold, its temples empty. The kingdom of Kush, which had endured for over 1,000 years, which had ruled Egypt and defied Rome, came to an end. But the story of Nubia does not end with Meroe's fall. The Nubian people endure, adapting to new circumstances. In the power vacuum left by Kush's collapse, new kingdoms emerge, the X-group culture, and later the Christian kingdoms of Nobatia, Makuria, and Alodia. These medieval Nubian kingdoms adopt Christianity, brought by missionaries from Byzantine Egypt, and they thrive for centuries, creating a rich Christian culture that is distinctly African. Nubian churches are adorned with frescoes of black saints and angels. Nubian kings correspond with Byzantine emperors and resist Arab invasions for centuries. Even after the fall of ancient Kush, Nubia remains a vibrant, independent civilization. Egypt, meanwhile, continues its long transformation. After Rome falls, Egypt becomes part of the Byzantine Empire, then is conquered by Arab Muslims in the 7th century. The ancient language dies out completely. The old religion is replaced by Christianity and then Islam. The monuments of the pharaohs are buried under sand, forgotten for over a millennium. Egypt, once the center of the world, becomes a province in a series of foreign empires, Arab, Ottoman, and finally British. Its ancient rivalry with Nubia fades into obscurity, remembered only in fragmentary inscriptions and half-forgotten legends. Yet the legacy of the Egypt-Nubia rivalry endures in ways both subtle and profound. It shaped the development of two of Africa's greatest civilizations. It influenced art, architecture, religion, and military strategy across the ancient world. It demonstrated that African kingdoms could not only compete with Mediterranean empires, but could sometimes surpass them. The Kushite conquest of Egypt remains one of history's most remarkable reversals, a colonized people becoming the colonizers, a subordinate kingdom becoming the ruling dynasty. It is a story of resilience, adaptation, and the enduring power of African civilization. And yet, for centuries, this story was erased. Western historians, uncomfortable with the idea of black African pharaohs, downplayed or ignored the 25th dynasty. The achievements of Kush were attributed to Egyptian influence, as if Nubians were merely imitators, incapable of greatness on their own. The rich, complex history of Nubia was reduced to a footnote, overshadowed by the more glamorous story of Egypt. Amun-Irenas, who defeated Rome, was forgotten. Taharqa, who built some of Egypt's greatest monuments, was reduced to a villain in Assyrian propaganda. The erasure of Nubian history is not accidental. It is the result of centuries of bias, racism, and colonial historiography. When European scholars began studying ancient Egypt in the 18th and 19th centuries, they did so through a lens of racial hierarchy. Egypt, with its monumental architecture and sophisticated culture, was too impressive to be considered African in the way that term was understood at the time. So scholars invented theories to explain it away. Some claimed that the ancient Egyptians were a Mediterranean race, distinct from sub-Saharan Africans. Others suggested that any achievements in Egypt must have come from foreign influence, Mesopotamian, Phoenician, anything but African. Nubia, being undeniably black African, was dismissed as a peripheral, derivative culture, a pale shadow of Egypt's greatness. This intellectual racism had real consequences. Archaeological expeditions prioritized Egyptian sites over Nubian ones. Museums filled their halls with Egyptian artifacts, while Nubian treasures languished in storage. Textbooks taught children about Cleopatra and Tutankhamun, but said nothing of Pa or Amun-Irenas. The narrative that took hold was one in which civilization flowed from north to south, from the Mediterranean to Africa, never the reverse. The idea that black Africans could have ruled Egypt, could have built pyramids, could have created a sophisticated empire that rivaled and even surpassed Egypt, this was too threatening to the racial hierarchies of the colonial era. So it was buried, dismissed, erased,